What's up guys, Houndish here. Today, there's even more news related to what's been going on at Bungie over the last week, the future of Destiny 2 and the final shape. And more than anything, this provides a little bit of context around some of the stuff we've heard this week. And so yeah, for the moment, this conversation's still going to be a big one, obviously. And Paul Tassi at Forbes posted an article today saying they've been able to talk at length with someone with inside knowledge of the situation at Bungie. And Paul Tassi's a pretty good source, so there's some interesting context from the inside and extra details about what's been going down over the past few months. So in terms of layoffs, the article says management said other levers were looked at to avoid layoffs, and when employees asked if one lever was executive compensation, they were told no, and that it would not happen in the company. Interestingly enough though, Paul Tassi has tweeted since and said Bungie has gotten back to me after the publication to say that Pete Parsons and some executives gave up annual bonuses before this, but it wasn't shared with others at the company until yesterday. So that's an interesting thing added into the mix there. But also from the article it says internally, really no one is blaming Sony for this. Even management and some employees were apparently told that if the Sony buyout didn't happen, that with current Destiny 2 performance at the studio, it would have been in jeopardy if they were still independent. So interesting that someone at Bungie's reached out to say executives did actually give up annual bonuses in some cases, but also that apparently management had suggested that the game itself would be in jeopardy if Bungie hadn't taken the Sony deal. So obviously, money has been an issue for some time, but this article also says the expensive new building was a separate project that would likely have not saved jobs given the context of when it was drafted and when the work started. And on top of that, the $1.2 billion that came from Sony for employee retention was spent long ago, often on buying out employees' Bungie shares, which then went to Sony. And they've said that there was nothing left in that pot to avoid layoffs, which wasn't what it was meant for this late in the transition. On top of that, the trend line of spending on the game over time made the current year's revenue estimates somewhat logical. The 45% miss is important, it was not necessarily some wildly inflated projection, however nearsighted it ended up being. And they say there's been a real damaging drop post-Lightfall in terms of player engagement and spending, although Lightfall itself sold very well. But it also suggests that employees at Bungie are really angry with leadership, and that's been communicated publicly in meetings. And apparently they'd said bets were made that didn't pay off, but those who made them remain in the company. And so obviously there's been a lot of stuff going on for quite a while over there. And what's happened this week obviously is a shock to a lot of us, but obviously it has been quietly brewing up for some time inside of Bungie. Then they get into more final shape specific stuff here, and they say the delay was known by some a couple of months ago, but it's happening late enough that there cannot be a 30th anniversary size drop to split the season, and they said that 30th anniversary took around 8 months to build. However, the plan is that there will be something in the season 23 gap. So that's interesting, and it suggests that Bungie do have a plan to drop something in the gap where the rumoured delay is going to be, but solid indications as well that it wouldn't be something the size of the 30th anniversary drop. Then on Final Shape it says they want it to not just be as good as Forsaken or Taken King, but better, and internally they've got the sense that it needs to be the best and viewed as the key to turning things around. And apparently according to this, Final Shape campaign and features are reportedly quite solid, even in the current state, but they want to go further, and there's some concern about crunch inside of the studio in order to make that happen in the relatively short delay period. And obviously it's hard to verify this from the outside, but if that really is the goal for Bungie and that extra time is going to be used towards that effort, then at least one of the positives that we can hopefully take from this is that Final Shape actually might be fairly decent. I guess we'll find out. But in terms of Destiny overall, they also apparently said that part of the new PvP strike team was impacted by layoffs, although significant progress has been made on the map pack already, and it shouldn't be cancelled. So a suggestion that those future PvP updates Joe Blackburn mentioned will hopefully still arrive. They also say inside of the studio, no significant changes have been announced to staff for the longer term future of D2 plans, and there's no known plans to reduce support for Destiny 2. They also say there's no info about the long-term vision for Destiny, something like a Destiny 3. They also suggested though that in-game LFG has been tremendously difficult from a tech perspective, and reportedly was actually announced to the community before the devs themselves, which if that's true is absolutely wild. They say as well it's more complicated than players will understand, even if it seems like an obvious thing that the game should have. They also said that there have been many meetings about microtransactions where devs wanted to reduce them, but they were always given the reply that they are necessary given how expensive Destiny is to operate. They also say complaints about new ones don't always reflect reality. Event cards may seem lame, but they sell well, for instance. They also say you'd be surprised how many people are still buying the oldest expansions. But finally, according to this, the ultimate goal at Bungie is still for them to be a multi-IP studio with multiple games and revenue streams. And they suggest as well that even if Marathon is a success, there still aren't likely to be plans for a huge mass migration from the D2 team to the Marathon team, abandoning the franchise. And so obviously I can't verify the source, but Paul Tassi is normally pretty good with this stuff and obviously has plenty of contacts. So there are some interesting insights into how things have been recently at Bungie. On the Final Shape side, obviously, there are plenty of us who still want to play it when it eventually arrives. So we can only hope that there's some truth and that some positives will come out of that delay. There's that indication in there that the Season 23 gap will have some kind of additional content drop, I guess, but that it won't be anything the size of the 30th anniversary. And hopefully that PvP map pack and some of the other updates that the PvP Strike team are working on for the future will still be a thing. Give us your thoughts about those comments around microtransactions as well. In terms of the business side of things and some of the obvious struggles that Bungie have had with finances, if you'd have asked me a year or so ago, I'd have been really surprised to imagine a world where Bungie was struggling to make money, right? And obviously Destiny is still pulling in quite a bit of cash, but it's always been an expensive game to produce, and Bungie have got plenty of expenses at the moment, right? Between the expansion of the studio, the fact that they're trying to launch multiple IPs, and continue to support Destiny with expansions every year, the seasonal model, and the episodes that are coming down the road, it certainly makes sense that that is pretty expensive. And Bungie have gotten more aggressive with the microtransactions in the past year or so as well, introducing the packs with some of the older stuff from Season of the Worthy, which was really expensive to purchase through Eververse. Even the fact that they hid the Eververse calendar because players were exploiting the fact that we could tell when things were going to be sold for Bright Dust and Silver. There have been plenty of other expensive bundles and even the price increase, so based on what Bungie is saying, obviously they felt the need to do those things. And while a lot of those financial issues are Bungie's fault, it does make a lot of sense as to why they've gotten more aggressive with some of the microtransactions and things like that. It's pretty crazy to think that Bungie obviously went independent, but then within a couple of years here, really, if the reports are to be believed, there are indications that they've had significant struggles surviving that, especially beyond Lightfall when player sentiment has dropped and spending has reduced from players. So it's unfortunate, but it certainly makes sense. Obviously, the result of all this, though, is what we've seen over the last week, people losing their jobs, a really significant PR crisis for Destiny and Bungie, and obviously all of this coming at a bad time for player sentiment already. And obviously greed and things like that are the only problems with Bungie upper management. It would appear, based on what developers have said, that they haven't been reactive enough to the sort of feedback that's coming in, and this Lightfall year has certainly seen a steady decline where Bungie haven't been able to react quick enough, improve the game and solve some of those core issues, which creates this kind of mountain ahead of them. But for today, that's the full article, and for the moment, for me, it's hard to give many more impressions than that. It pretty much continues to paint the picture most of us have been able to get a sense of watching events over the past couple of years, and especially the past week or so. But it is interesting context nonetheless, and I'll link Paul Tassi's article down below. Give us your thoughts in the comment section though if you've enjoyed the video. A rating really does help us out, and feel free to get subscribed to the channel for more Destiny content. But otherwise, I'll catch you guys very soon.